The manila envelope hit the table in front of me with a flat, deliberate slap. I looked up, and my husband Derek was smiling. Actually smiling, the way someone smiles when they've been rehearsing a moment for a long time and are finally getting to perform it. Around him, his mother Connie, his brother Wade, and Wade's wife Tamsin were all watching me with this barely contained energy, like kids waiting for a piñata to crack open. The banner above them read, "Congratulations, Derek, Regional Director." Tinsel and silver balloons everywhere, Christmas music playing softly from the Bluetooth speaker in the corner. And there I was, 43 years old, standing in my own living room in a house I had helped pay for, holding a glass of sparkling cider I no longer wanted to drink. "Surprise," Derek said. That was it, just that one word. And then Connie actually laughed, this bright, relieved laugh, like she'd been holding it in for months. I want to tell you that I screamed. I want to say I threw something. But here's what I actually did. I set down the cider glass very carefully on the side table, picked up that envelope and opened it. My hands were steady. I don't know how. Maybe because some part of me had been waiting for exactly this. Not the divorce papers specifically, but the proof. The confirmation that the feeling I'd been carrying around for months, the low, constant hum of wrongness, had been real all along. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this story actually starts. 16 years is a long time to be married to someone. Long enough that you stop seeing them clearly, the way you stop seeing a painting you walk past every day. Derek and I met when I was 27, at a company holiday party. Not his company, not mine, but a mutual friend's firm in downtown Chicago. He was charming in that uncomplicated way some men are, tall, easy laugh, asked follow-up questions when I talked, which felt remarkable at the time. I was running a small alteration shop out of a rented space on Maple Street in Glenbrook, the quiet suburb where I'd grown up and somehow never left. He was in middle management at a logistics company, ambitious but not cutthroat, or so I thought. We got married in June, 2 years after we met. Small ceremony, backyard of my parents' place, my mom crying into a dish towel because she couldn't find a handkerchief. I wore a dress I had made myself, ivory silk charmeuse with hand-sewn buttons down the back, each one covered in the same fabric. It took me 3 weeks. I was proud of it. Derek cried when he saw me walk out the back door onto the grass. That part was real. I still believe that. We moved into a house in Glenbrook, a 1960s split level on Creekwood Drive with a cracked driveway and a kitchen that smelled like someone else's cooking until I repainted the cabinets and put in new shelf liner. We fixed it up slowly, over years, the way you do when money is careful and time is the only thing you have more of. I kept the alterations shop, which eventually became something more: bridal work, custom pieces, a loyal client base built entirely on word of mouth. I wasn't getting rich, but I was good at what I did, and that mattered to me in a way that was hard to explain to someone like Derek, who measured success almost exclusively in title and salary. The only other creature who truly understood the rhythm of my workdays was Ptolemy, our cat, a 17-year-old gray tabby with one cloudy eye and the temperament of a retired judge. We'd adopted him as a young cat the first year of our marriage, so he was as much a fixture of our life together as the cracked driveway and the kitchen shelf liner. He slept on my cutting table when I worked from home. He had opinions about everything and expressed them loudly at 4 in the morning. Derek had never been what you'd call an animal person, but even he left Ptolemy alone with a kind of wary respect. For a long time, the marriage was fine. Not extraordinary, fine. We had our routines, our small rituals, the unspoken negotiations that hold a household together. I cooked Sunday dinners. Derek handled the lawn. We watched the same 3 shows. We argued about money occasionally and about his mother constantly. Connie had never fully warmed to me, and I had long since stopped trying to figure out why. She had her own way of making her feelings known, the slight pause before complimenting anything I made, the way she'd address questions about the house to Derek even when I was standing right there, the annual Thanksgiving comment about how some women just aren't cut out for certain things, which everyone pretended not to hear. But the real shift, the thing I can now identify as the beginning of the end, started about 2 years before that December party. That was when Derek got a new boss. His name was Greg Halford. He'd come in as VP of Operations at Derek's company, a lateral hire from a competitor, and within about 6 weeks, he had completely remade Derek's professional world. Derek started working longer hours. He started talking differently, using phrases like bandwidth and strategic alignment at the dinner table. He lost 12 pounds. He bought new clothes without telling me, which he had never done before. I noticed all of it, and I told myself it was just ambition, just someone finally lighting a fire under my husband, and maybe that was good. What I didn't understand yet was that Greg Halford wasn't just Derek's boss. He was becoming Derek's mirror, showing him a version of himself that Derek apparently liked a lot better than the one he'd been living with for 16 years. I pieced this together slowly, over months, from things Derek said and things he stopped saying. Greg was divorced. Greg had a condo downtown. Greg traveled light, answered to no one, had built his life exactly the way he wanted it. Derek quoted Greg the way some people quote scripture. Greg says the biggest mistake men make is staying somewhere comfortable when they should be moving, Derek told me one evening in October, about 14 months before the party. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me hand-stitch a hem on a client's gown, and there was something in his voice I didn't like, a kind of testing quality, like he was reading a line out loud to see how it sounded. "Moving where?" I asked without looking up from my work. "Just forward," he said, "toward what they actually want." I pulled the needle through. "That's very fortune cookie of Greg." Derek didn't laugh. He went back to his laptop. I thought about that conversation more times than I should have over the following months. I replayed it while I was cutting fabric, and while I was driving to client appointments, and while I was lying awake at 3 in the morning listening to Ptolemy snore at the foot of the bed. There was something Derek hadn't said out loud that night, and I was starting to get a very clear picture of what it was. By November, the month before the party, things had gotten quiet in a way that felt loud. Derek and I weren't fighting. We were barely talking. He came home late 3 nights out of 5. He'd stopped asking about my work, stopped commenting on what was for dinner, stopped doing that thing he used to do where he'd stand behind me while I was sewing and put his hands on my shoulders for just a moment before stepping to bed. Small things. The kind of things that seem petty to name out loud, but that, added together, amount to a person slowly vacating a life. I asked him once, directly, in the second week of November, if there was something he needed to tell me. We were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. Ptolemy was arranged in the chair between us like a furry mediator. Derek looked at me for a long moment. "I've just got a lot going on with the promotion track," he said. "Greg's been pushing us all hard. I'm tired." "Okay," I said. "Okay," he said. That was the whole conversation. I wanted to pull on the thread more, but something stopped me. Maybe the way he'd answered just a little too smoothly, like the answer had been ready before the question. I scratched Ptolemy behind the ears and carried the dishes to the sink, and the quiet settled back over the house like snow. The promotion party was planned for the second Saturday in December. Derek had asked me to organize it, which, I now understood, was its own kind of cruelty. I'd called the family, arranged the food, strung the silver balloons, ordered the banner from the print shop on Elmwood Avenue, made 24 of Derek's favorite lemon shortbread cookies from scratch. I'd worn the burgundy wrap dress I'd sewn myself last spring, the one with the long zipper and the weight of good fabric. I wanted him to be proud. That's the part that still catches in my throat when I think about it. I wanted him to be proud. And then the envelope hit the table. And then Derek said, "Surprise!" And then Connie laughed. I read through the papers standing right there in my own living room, surrounded by tinsel and the smell of lemon cookies. They were thorough. Derek had clearly had them prepared for a while. The filing date on the documents was November 8th, 3 weeks earlier. While I'd been ordering balloons and printing banners, he'd been meeting with a divorce attorney. While I'd been making his favorite cookies, he'd been signing his name to papers that erased 16 years of my life. I finished reading. I looked up. Derek was watching me with this expression I can only describe as cautious triumph, like he wasn't sure yet if he'd gotten away with something. "Do you have a pen?" I asked, The room went very still. "What?" Derek said. "A pen," I said. "I'd like to sign these now." Wade made a sound. Tamsin grabbed his arm. Connie's smile flickered. I signed every page where the little sticky tabs indicated, in my clearest handwriting, the same handwriting I used to label my fabric bolts and write notes to clients. I handed the papers back to Derek, picked up my cider glass from the side table, and looked at his mother. "Enjoy the cookies," I said. "I made them from scratch." Then I walked to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and let Ptolemy climb into my lap. He was old and slow, and his purr had developed a faint rattle in the last year that the vet said was nothing to worry about yet. I put both hands on his warm, bony back, and I breathed. Because here's what Derek didn't know. Here's what none of them knew, sitting out there in my living room surrounded by my balloons and my banner and my cookies. There was a reason I'd signed those papers without hesitating. Not defeat, not shock. I had been doing my own preparing. And tomorrow, his family was going to find out exactly what that meant. I sat there for a long time with my hands on Ptolemy's back, feeling his ribs rise and fall, listening to that faint rattle in his purr that the vet said not to worry about yet. The sounds from the living room had gone strange, the Christmas music still playing, the low murmur of voices, the eventual shuffle of people who didn't know what to do with themselves. At some point, I heard the front door open and close, then again. Then the music stopped. Derek knocked on the bedroom door around 9 o'clock. "Nora," he said. That was all. Just my name, like a question. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. I genuinely didn't have anything to say to him that night that would have been useful to either of us. I heard him stand there for a moment, and then his footsteps moved back down the hall toward the guest room. What I was thinking about, sitting in the dark with Ptolemy, was a woman named Sylvia Okafor. I'd met Sylvia 8 months earlier, in March, at a continuing education seminar for small business owners at the Glenbrook Public Library. She was a family law attorney with an office on Weston Boulevard, and she'd been on the panel talking about asset protection for sole proprietors. After the seminar, I'd gone up to ask her a specific question about separating personal and business liability, and we'd ended up talking for 45 minutes in the parking lot while the library staff turned off the lights inside. She was direct and funny and did not waste words. I liked her immediately. I hadn't hired her that night because I didn't think I needed to, but I kept her card. I pulled it out in April when I found the burner phone. It wasn't dramatic. Derek had left his gym bag open on the laundry room floor, and when I was moving it to get to the washing machine, a small prepaid phone slid out onto the tile, the kind you buy at a gas station. I stared at it for about 10 seconds, then I put it back exactly where it had fallen, finished the laundry, and called Sylvia from my car in the driveway. "Tell me everything you own," she said, "and everything you've contributed financially to this marriage. Don't leave anything out." I told her. It took almost 2 hours, spread across 3 phone calls over the following week. Here is what I had contributed to 16 years of marriage with Derek Calloway, in terms that mattered legally. I had paid exactly half the down payment on the house on Creekwood Drive, $31,000, pulled from savings I'd built before we married. My name was on the mortgage. I had paid half of every mortgage payment for 16 years. My alterations and bridal work, the business I'd run out of that rented space on Maple Street for most of our marriage, had contributed an average of $52,000 a year to our household income, more in good years, less during the 2 years the pandemic had gutted every wedding in a 50-mile radius. I had a business account, a personal checking account, and a joint account with Derek for household expenses. What Derek didn't know, what I had never specifically highlighted for him because it had never seemed necessary, was that 18 months earlier, when a longtime bridal client named Rosemary Fitch had sold her family's textile import business and come to me to make her retirement gala gown, she had also offered me a business investment opportunity as a thank you for years of work. I'd put $47,000 into a small stake in her daughter's sustainable fabric company. The stake had, in the time since, grown to just under $94,000. Derek had no idea that account existed. Sylvia had advised me to keep it that way until the papers were filed. "Don't touch it. Don't move it. Don't mention it," she'd said. "Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not a 50-50 state. What you do between now and filing matters. What he does matters more. Document everything." So I had documented everything. For 8 months, I had quietly, carefully, methodically documented everything. Bank statements, household expense records going back to the beginning of the marriage, receipts for every repair and renovation I'd paid for or contributed to on the Creekwood Drive house, records of my business income, and, with the help of a private investigator Sylvia had recommended, a quiet, methodical man named Curtis who charged $85 an hour and communicated exclusively by encrypted email, documentation of the fact that Derek had been conducting an ongoing relationship with a woman named Brianna Solano, who worked in the marketing department at his company, for approximately 14 months. I was not planning to use Brianna's name publicly. I didn't need to. Illinois allows no-fault divorce, and fault doesn't change the financial math much. What I needed was a complete picture of the marital estate. Sylvia had that picture. She'd had it for 6 weeks. The filing date on Derek's divorce papers was November 8th. I remember being almost impressed. He'd finally done something decisive. What he hadn't known was that Sylvia had filed my response documents on November 14th, 6 days later, quietly and without fanfare, at the Cook County Courthouse. His attorney wouldn't have received the notification until the following week, probably around the time Derek was finalizing the party invitations. Derek thought he was serving me. He had, in fact, walked directly into a response that had been waiting for him. That night, sitting with Ptolemy, I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt the specific sadness of a person who has been proven right about something they desperately wished they'd been wrong about. 16 years. The cracked driveway we'd finally repaved in year 8. The kitchen shelf liner I'd replaced 3 times. The dress I'd made myself for our wedding, with every button hand-covered in ivory silk charmeuse. I let myself feel all of it, quietly, in the dark, with my old cat's rattling purr filling the room. And then I went to sleep. The next morning was a Sunday. Derek was in the kitchen when I came out, standing at the counter with a coffee mug, still wearing the clothes he'd slept in. He looked like a man who had expected a different night than the one he'd had. He'd probably expected tears, or a fight, or some kind of dramatic unraveling. What he'd gotten was a closed door and silence. "We should talk," he said. "We should," I agreed. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. He sat across from me, and for a moment he looked almost like himself, the man I'd married, the one who'd cried in my parents' backyard when he saw my dress. It lasted about 4 seconds. "I know this is a shock," he started. "It really isn't," I said. He paused. "I want to be fair about the house. I'm not trying to take anything that isn't." "Derek." I set my mug down. "Sylvia Okafor filed my response to your petition on November 14th. You should call your attorney this morning. There are some details in the counterfiling that you're going to want to discuss with him before the week starts." The color left his face in a way I had never seen before. "You... what?" "I've been working with a family law attorney since April," I said, "since before you filed. The response covers the full marital asset breakdown, my contributions to the down payment, 16 years of joint mortgage payments, the business income records, the renovation costs. It also includes a formal request for appraisal of the property on Creekwood Drive, which current comps put somewhere between $340,000 and $360,000. My equity position is well documented." Derek opened his mouth and closed it. "There's also the matter of your 401k, I said, which has a current balance of approximately $218,000, a portion of which was accumulated during the marriage and is therefore subject to division under Illinois law. Sylvia has the QDRO paperwork ready." He pushed back from the table. "You had someone investigating me." "I had an attorney protecting my legal interests," I said, "which is what you were doing when you walked into a divorce attorney's office in October and had those papers drawn up. The difference is I didn't hand mine to you at a party I made you plan yourself." That landed. I watched it land. He left the kitchen. I heard him on the phone in the guest room, his voice low and urgent, the unmistakable tone of a man delivering news that isn't going to be received well. His attorney, presumably. Then, around noon, Connie called. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to it. She'd apparently spoken to Derek that morning, and the call was a remarkable piece of work, equal parts accusation and backpedaling, with a stretch in the middle where she suggested that perhaps I had contributed to the distance in the marriage by being too focused on my little shop. I saved the voicemail, not for legal purposes, just because I knew that someday, probably years from now, I would want to hear it again and confirm that I had not imagined any of this. Wade called 20 minutes later. I let that one go too. Sylvia and I met on Tuesday morning at her office on Weston Boulevard. She had a corner office with 2 windows and a small succulent collection on the sill that she referred to, without irony, as her low-maintenance clients. She went through the response filing with me in detail and told me what to expect over the coming months. "He's going to want to settle," she said, sliding her reading glasses up. "His attorney will push for it once they see the documentation. A contested trial would cost him more than a fair settlement, and the asset picture doesn't favor him." "What does fair look like?" I asked. "The house sells. Proceeds split equitably given your documented contributions. You'd likely see 60% or better. A portion of the 401k, probably in the range of $80,000 to $95,000. Your business assets are yours outright, since they predate the marriage and have been maintained separately. The investment account is yours. It was funded with business earnings that post-date any commingling." I nodded. "And the timeline?" "Uncontested, if he's reasonable. 4 to 6 months to finalize. Illinois has a waiting period." She paused. "He can make it longer if he wants to be difficult, but I don't think he'll want to." She was right. He didn't want to. The settlement negotiation took 11 weeks. Derek's attorney pushed on the 401k division and let everything else go with minimal resistance, which told me, more clearly than anything Derek had said or done, exactly how much he just wanted this to be over. He wanted to move forward toward what he actually wanted, to use the language of his personal philosopher Greg Halford. Fine. I wasn't interested in standing in the way of that. The house on Creekwood Drive sold in late April for $358,000. My share, after accounting for contributions and closing costs, was $196,400. The QDRO transferred $88,000 from Derek's 401k into a rollover IRA in my name. My business was mine. My investment account was mine. I signed the final dissolution papers on a Thursday afternoon in Sylvia's office, with her assistant notarizing the signatures. Sylvia walked me out to the parking lot afterward, and we stood there in the April sunshine for a moment. "You did well," she said. "Most people don't come in as prepared as you were." "I had a good 8 months," I said. She laughed. "Call me if you need anything." I found an apartment in a building about 2 miles from my shop on Maple Street, 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms, a south-facing window in the living room that got good afternoon light. I brought my sewing equipment and my fabric bolts and my cutting table. I brought Ptolemy and his carrier, and when I opened the carrier door in the new apartment, he walked out, sniffed the perimeter of the living room with judicial thoroughness, and then climbed onto the cutting table and settled into his spot as if nothing had changed. He was 18 years old by then, moving slowly, sleeping more. The vet had started using the word comfortable in a way that meant something specific. I knew we probably didn't have a lot of time left together, and I made sure to be home more, to let him sleep on my lap in the evenings when I was reading or watching something on my laptop. He didn't seem distressed. He seemed like what he was, an old creature who had lived a full life and was winding down with dignity. He died in July, on a Tuesday morning, while I was sitting with him on the floor of the living room with the south window open and the summer light coming through. It was peaceful, which was what I had wanted for him. I cried for 2 days, which surprised no one who knew me and would have baffled Derek, who had never understood what Ptolemy was to me. That was fine. Derek didn't need to understand it.